Hello, welcome to episode 42 of This Week in Teams.
All right. Good morning. Welcome to This Week in Teams. I'm Jay Leask, joined as usual by Craig Janke.
Hello, I'm Craig Janke. That is Jay Leask.
And we are very excited to continue our Microsoft Viva introductory series with special guest Susan or Sue Hanley from Susan Hanley LLC. Sue, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm awesome. It's really great to have you on board. I have been, you and I have known each other for a few years now, but, I've always seen you as information architecture, knowledge management, a very business-oriented professional trying to help on the business side. And so when we got the opportunity to talk with you about today's topic, Viva Connections, I was really excited to hear that side of things, right? Can you tell us a little bit about, who you are and how you got to where you are?
Sure. Well, I've been doing what I've been doing for a really long time, so that would be a very, very long story. But I'll try to sort of make it
the elevator version of it.
I'll try to do the mini version of it. So I currently am an independent consultant. I've had my own consulting practice for a little over 15 years now. And prior to that, I was with a little firm that got acquired by a very big firm called Dell, and I ran the national portal practice for that firm and for Dell Professional Services. And then prior to that, I spent 18 years of my life as a business analyst and systems analyst managing projects, doing project work at American Management Systems. And then the last 5 years that I was there, I ran their knowledge management program. And so I sort of built my career through education and training. So I have a degree in information systems management, and through just having an incredible amount of opportunity through the course of my career to learn things, to develop expertise in things, and working for great people who allowed me to explore and learn and grow and, sort of hone in on things that really got me excited. And so I've really specialized in the last 25 years on intranets, because helping people connect and get great value from effectively their knowledge experiences, helping me know what we know is how I would basically describe knowledge management. And the way we do that in most organizations is via our intranet. And because I love metadata and I do have a lot of education and training in, I was a data modeler and back in the day. So metadata is my friend. So when I go deep, it's in that area, sort of making those connections and helping to make complicated problems smaller and easier for people. So for me, people is at the center of everything, which is really why I'm glad you associate me with the business side of things, because that's the lane in which I hope to stay.
Yeah, I will say my first job in the Microsoft space, officially, I was a consultant at Booz Allen, and we had an intranet portal, and we wanted people to upload their contract deliverables into that portal so we could start searching them, sharing them, learning from that. And I said, cool, so how do we search on this? You just go to search and type your keyword. I'm like, right, but are we doing anything to identify it as this, or what are we doing to help people see what it is and how to find it, and what kind of metadata are we putting out? And he's like, oh, we don't have time for that. I'm like, oh, it's going to be a long job right here.
It is. It is the thing that nobody wants to spend time on, but everybody wants it. So.
Well, but we did the same thing at AMS, and I wasn't in charge of this, but we had 50 attributes that we were asking people to associate with the content that they shared. Let me just tell you, people have about 15 to 30 seconds of patience for metadata. And as much as we love it, we need to make it, this is why tools like SharePoint Syntax are so important. People hate metadata. Now, there are contexts in which it is critically important. So we need to help people think of metadata as part of the grammar of their document, meaning I spend all this time writing it. I should also spend that extra time tagging it. But we have to make that much easier for humans to do. And if we can automate some of that process, if we can use some of the capabilities in SharePoint that we get with, location-based metadata, column defaults, and the magical document set that no one ever uses, things like that, and syntax to assign metadata, and now people can consume that metadata as well. We can do all kinds of things to make this a little bit easier, and then we can improve the way search finds content so that metadata isn't the only thing that we need to improve findability. And with all of those, if you combine all of those things, that's where you get sort of magical experiences.
Yeah. And it's not the easiest thing to get into an organization.
No, but each one alone adds incremental value. So you can have an aspirational goal of making all of that happen, but still get there in little steps that again, add value to your users. And the way you decide what you do depends on, let's go back to people. What are the organizational priorities? What do we care about? And which problems are we trying to solve? And how do we prioritize them? I would say you can have it all, you just can't have it all at the same time. So let's just figure out how we're going to do what adds the most value.
Oh man. So people listening know why I was so excited to bring you on to talk about this. So let's talk about what problem are you trying to solve? We often hear that Viva Connections is the intranet in Teams, but really it's much more than that. Can you give us a little bit about your elevator pitch for Viva Connections?
I typically start with the Microsoft tagline, it's the gateway to your employee experience. But ultimately, honestly, it is a way of thinking about, I don't want to say you're in Intranet and Teams, but ultimately it really does allow that capability. For me, it's really two things. Number one, it's about bringing the intranet to me where I'm working. Mm-hmm. So not creating a destination that is other than. So it's same then. It's also, Viva Connections, the entire Viva program is a reminder of how important it is to think holistically about the people in the organization. HR shouldn't have their own view of the world, Corp Comms their own view of the world, and IT their own view of the world. Great intranets have always sort of brought those elements of the employee experience together and designed around them. But not every intranet is a great intranet. To make Viva work, you are actually sort of doing what I think is always the right thing to do, which is taking an employee or a people-centric view of the world and bringing it together. So what Viva Connections reminds us about is if you haven't been doing that, it gives you a framework in which to have those conversations. So now, in addition to bringing what we had as an intranet into Teams, it's a reminder of, hey, can we take our intranet and make it more engaging by weaving in Yammer communities and promoting the use of Yammer to go cross-team, to deliver cross-team communities of practice and engagement opportunities. Can we also think about the apps that people need on a regular basis, or the little microservices that make an intranet so personal? And that's really an opportunity with the dashboard. How can I bring the little things, not the full-blown application? I mean, we are still going to need to be able to get to the full-blown application for certain things, but can we bring those mini things, and microservices is the term that we use, right? Can we bring those mini microservices to the right people at the right time? As I said, I've been looking, I judge an intranet beauty pageant is what I'd call it. I've been doing it for the last 8 years, and I can tell you that the greatest intranets and the ones that we always award have been doing this forever. But what Viva does is it gives all of us a framework for making that happen. I mean, a dashboard app can be as simple as connecting to a URL or connecting to a SharePoint page. Look, I can build them. I'm not super technical, and yet I've sort of figured out how to grab content that brings what people really need front and center. And so all of this, that's a very long answer about what is Viva Connections, but it's really a way to deliver, to think about, plan, organize, and deliver that great employee experience.
Yeah, so a lot of times I just hear when customers have that, it's just a button, right? I click on it and it launches my intranet inside Teams, nothing special, right? So that is a great explanation on how they have to do it, how they have to think holistically about it.
But it can't do just that, by the way. I mean, look, if you don't do all those other things, you can still bring your intranet to where people are working. Fundamentally, if that's if you're thinking about sort of a journey, an aspirational journey to get a great employee experience, that might be your, crawl, walk, run. That could be your crawl.
Yes, definitely. So the interesting thing about that is, like, I've seen a lot of people just, they had the SharePoint on premises, the 2010s, the 2013s, mostly the 2010s, and they just kind of lifted and shifted them into SharePoint Online, right? So now they're trying to get Viva Connections to work, and that's built more for modern sites, specifically.
Not built more. It is built exclusively for modern sites. Right. I mean, right. You need at least one modern home site, or get it. You're not ready.
Yeah. So you're already getting into my question of anticipating it. What's our best step to do that? Okay, we've got it. We've got our classic sites. We're using it. Our users are using it. I need to modernize it. Where do I start?
From my perspective is, don't think about Viva Connections. Think about building a great intranet. And that is the foundation on the modern platform. That's the foundation for getting any value at all from Viva Connections. For step one is to forget about sort of connections. There are some specific capabilities that you get with Viva Connections, but you better take a step back and start thinking about, how can I build a great modern intranet? So that's what you need first. So from an architectural perspective, you need a home site, the site that you can now designate as the landing site for the Viva Connections and the intranet experience. And it's officially a specific, let's call it a wrapper that sits around a communication site. It has to be a communication site. And ideally, it should be open to the entire organization. I'm not sure it would have much value if it was not. So now you used to need PowerShell to create that, to instantiate a site as a home site. Now you can do it in the admin center. So nobody should say it's hard to do. What's hard is creating that great home site. But there's a lot of guidance. Microsoft has a lot of guidance on building a modern intranet. And I think a lot of it is, I think all of it is really good. I worked on creating a large majority of it. So I feel like I've had my tentacles in a lot of it. And I like it. I mean, this is what I use every day in my consulting practice. Yep. It really does reflect Microsoft has outstanding documentation writers. It reflects their phenomenal ability to sort of work with the product team to craft a story in a meaningful way. And you really should look at that guidance because there's a lot of it's a lot to consume. There's a lot involved. So, but but it will give you a really good idea.
Yeah, with the lookbooks that they've been putting out, make it so much easier than it ever used to be.
Yeah, yes-ish. So here's what I say about the lookbook. The lookbook sites are beautiful, but they are not your intranet. And you need to look at what you get with the lookbook when you deploy the lookbook to your tenant, and you need to adapt it for your organization. Nothing that you get from the lookbook should be used as is. Mm-hmm. So from a graphical perspective, they're great. From an IA perspective, not all of those sites follow what I would consider good practice. And so, but they're all beautiful, and what they show you is what is possible. Yes. So I encourage people to use them as a design framework, but adapt them to meet your needs. Some of them have, some of the pages have way too much content for a regular sort of department, but they show you what could be done. So it gives you an idea, again, of what is possible, not necessarily what is practical in your organization.
So to slightly misquote you, I think you just said one of my favorite things that's really relevant across the M365 platform, which is that you need to look at what you get with this technology and then adapt it, because whether it's the lookbooks as examples or it's it's what I can do with Connections versus what you choose to do, like adapting it to your specific needs. And this is where that business conversation comes in. Adapting it to your specific needs is how you actually get the most out of the tool, which is one of the things I love the most about what Microsoft has done in the last probably 3 years, 5 years, is all of the great tech they're building. They're starting to build business apps on top of it. So they're actually showing you, like, how can you use this to solve your problems rather than just deploy and walk away.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think that's a great strategy, is to, again, you can't, use it with your own sort of journey in mind, I guess. So yes, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, just to go to just like a slightly different Viva, insights and workplace analytics. What I really love about that is so much of the documentation, so much of the reporting that they give you with that says, this is what you should look at, and this is why it's important. And if you don't believe us, click on this link, and it's going to take you to an outside study that somebody's been studying this as to why it's important. So don't just take Microsoft's word for it. But yeah, really the why behind why you want to do things is important. I was just having this conversation with somebody else internally yesterday, but the why behind the question, and the customer says, hey, can I implement Teams, right? It's like, well, yes, you can, but why do you want to implement Teams specifically? What is it that you want to do with it? So that we make sure that we can set it up and configure it the way that you want it to work. Or
yeah, I love that you said that. I love that you said, because I normally say to people, I wish I could have been a developer, because for developers, the answer to every question is yes, I can do that. Sure, let me do it. For a business analyst, the answer to every question is, why do you want to do that? Yep. So I feel like a developer can say yes to everything, and a business analyst first has to say, well, no, what are you trying to achieve? Why do you want to do it? Because it may, oftentimes, a developer can implement any requirement. Business analysts should hate requirements, because requirements define how something needs to be done. Well, there may be another way to do it that is like half the time and money, gets the same outcome without that following that requirement. So I feel like as a business analyst, I always have to understand the why. What are you trying to do, and what outcome goal are you trying to get to? Because maybe we can get there a different way.
I totally off topic, but I just had I was looking at a set of user stories from a customer that and it's, as this type of user, I need to be able to do this, but not the outcome and the why. It was the specific requirement.
Oh, so they didn't give you the so that.
Right? That's right. They missed the so that.
Right.
Yes.
So it's funny. So a lot of times one of the things people often do to stop using the R word, which I think everyone will agree is a bad thing, is you just translate that to a user story. Well, that doesn't cut it if you also don't get to the outcome. The so that, or in order to, because then we cannot. I usually like to say that we derive requirements, we don't collect them. Yep. And so we gather outcomes from which we derive requirements. And that, if you can think about the world that way, it really helps sort of frame your conversations.
So earlier you said, you mentioned that just putting your intranet in Teams is potentially a good starting point. And again, I'm really good at misquoting people on things. So can you talk a little bit about how Viva Connections can grow with your company, both from a how you roll it out perspective, but also, as your use of Microsoft 365 grows and changes, how can your use of Connections grow with that?
So I'm going to just take a step back. Nothing starts without a great intranet. So the first thing you need to think about when you're planning Viva Connections is, how do I make my intranet really answer the mail, do the work we need it to do, deliver the experiences we need to deliver. So as your intranet starts to deliver more and more experiences, they will naturally flow into Viva Connections, because it's your intranet, not Viva Connections. The unique piece of Viva Connections that I see growing with the organization is the dashboard element of it. And as you think about what microservices can we deliver to our organization, and how can we target them to the right people? So when I think about how does your Viva Connections grow with your organizations, it's really, how do we extend what we are doing and take advantage of audiences? Because you don't have to have them. It makes your intranet more special, if you will. Sure. But you can certainly launch without them. But as you start to discover the need to do more audience targeting, and you develop the back-end AD group, Azure AD group, to support that audience, as an example, new hires, sort of, calculating at how can we make an Azure AD group that represents people who have joined within the last 4 months, and then how can we create apps to deliver dashboard experiences for that particular group of people in their first month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever makes sense in our organization. by having the connections framework in place, we don't have to deliver that on day one, but it gives us an opportunity to expand and grow based on our business priorities, because nothing is free. Yes, you own the technology, but you still have to invest time and energy and development resources to craft them. So you really do want to prioritize high impact, sort of relatively low cost apps first, and then start thinking about how do we charter and plan for high impact, higher cost implementations. And it's really all about prioritizing what's important to your organization, so that I don't want to say Viva Connections is growing with you. I would say that your employee experiences are being extended and expanded to deliver more value to people who should be at the heart of all of this thinking.
That's awesome. So go ahead, Craig.
So my question is then, well, that sounds like that's a kind of a team effort, right? So what kind of people do we need on our team to have this great internet and do this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I actually was in some partner training for Microsoft yesterday, and one of the people at Microsoft kept saying, this is a corporate communications activity. And I was like, oh my God, please don't say that. It's not just corporate. You do not assume that CorpCom owns the Intranet homepage. If you do that, we're going to be right back in the position where we are with all these legacy intranets that get abandoned or not used. We need to partner with the rest of the organization to deliver those great experiences. So I think in terms of what parts of the organization should be involved, it's always almost always CorpCom if you have that department. I have several clients right now that haven't quite matured enough to have a corporate communications department, and if they are, it's focused externally, not internally. Yep. So we need to think about who's oriented internally. Largely, that's HR. And to be honest with you, HR has been left out a lot of intranet planning. So again, HR, think about sort of the key stakeholders in the Microsoft Viva experience. When you think about what's being offered, and we have L&D, we have well-being, we have information and knowledge management, and we have our classic intranet. That should define who your which stakeholders need to be included in the planning. So yeah, IT, of course. And I always tell people, I cannot guarantee an intranet success, but I can 100% guarantee a failure, and that's if IT leads. Yep. It cannot be, in fact, I've now gotten to the point where if someone says, well, we don't really have any business partnership on our intranet, I tell them, you know what, don't spend money right now until you have a business partner. And it should be a combination of, if you've got it, CorpCom, HR, knowledge management, maybe quality, and maybe a representative from operations, because, hey, we got to deliver it to the people where they're working. And depending on the type of organization you have, and maybe you're not all people who sit as, what people like to call an information worker. You may have people in the field who are never at a desk. Don't exclude them, because they're an important part of your organization. So you need people who represent that community to start thinking about what is not what should be in Viva Connections and what should be in the Intranet, is what are the information applications and reports and whatever that we need to be effective in our job, and think about how can we deliver that to you when and where you need it in the format that you need. So ultimately, that's going to take me back to my knowledge management roots, because isn't that what knowledge management is all about? Right information, right place, right time, right person, right format. That's the superpower, I think, for the Viva family as a whole, because I don't think we can give it all to Connections, because Viva Topics has a huge part of that. But sort of that's really what our ultimate, that's the end state that we can aspire to, and that all of the suite of products helps us enable.
So, first of all, you're absolutely right in that the experience that you're getting across the Viva platform really is what's driving each of the individual tools. It is not just Viva Topics to solve a problem. It is Viva Topics to enhance how Viva Connections showcases, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a really great piece for me to misquote there. Let me ask, and I suspect that the answer will drive across Viva instead of just in Viva Connections, but what are some of your favorite capabilities that your customers are getting as they start to turn on this tool set?
Yeah.
Well, I think my favorite capability is just so many. Like, you could always bring a SharePoint site into Teams. You guys have done that. But what you lost was navigation.
Yes.
So you're not really getting the right a great experience, but yes, you could have done it. So it's a baby thing to me to be able to bring my entire intranet with its navigation. I'm an IA. I worked hard on that. I want people to have access to it. So
well, that in the search too.
Yeah, well, yes. And so search, yes. But honestly, for me, research shows that at least today, 70, 80, 90% of your intranet users are expecting to be able to navigate to the content that they're looking for, and that they don't start searching unless the nav fails. And so, and oftentimes they will nav their way to a container and then search
within it.
Because remember, historically, you guys mentioned, the SharePoint 2010 or whatever, although historically people haven't trusted search.
Yes.
And it has failed to deliver. So there is an expectation on an intranet that you have thought through my nav experiences and you're delivering that to me as well. So to be able to get that and bring that into Teams is a super cool feature. The other part of Viva Connections, and I'm super excited about, is the fact that it is now requiring or expecting to, I don't know, not requiring, I can't think of the right word, but it's encouraging all of us to think more holistically about employee experience and to partner with the right organizations, in the right business units in our organization to deliver these great experiences. So my favorite feature isn't a feature, it's a concept that it reminds us to think about. So that it encourages us to think the right way, or think, sort of deliver holistically, I guess. I don't know what other word to use, but
I will say the first time I clicked on, so our intranet is called The Point. So the logo in the Teams nav says The Point. And the first time I clicked on it by mistake a second time and got the nav underneath it, and like my mind was blown, because you're right. Like, you could bring a SharePoint site in, but not being able to click around and navigate to whatever resources I'm looking for. That absolutely blew my mind the first time. So, what do we have left here? Quite a few things, actually. So quick question. What outside of the obvious and maybe that is the answer, the Viva Suite itself, what other capabilities is Connections bringing to you or connecting to? What other things should people be thinking about, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
As you're planning Viva Connections, I mean, look, I think always the foundation of all of this is a great intranet. And so you should always be thinking about monitoring what are people doing in our intranet and how can I continue to deliver value. We should be thinking really a lot more strategically about our comms strategy, because one of the things the Microsoft Suite brings to us is multiple channels for communications. And comms professionals who are really on top of this are struggling today with where do I post content, because historically there have been a lot of organizations that have delivered all of their news in Yammer. And now you think about sort of what you can do with news delivered in SharePoint. Should we be using Yammer as our corporate news channel? Should it be SharePoint? What kind of news goes in Yammer? What kind goes in SharePoint? And what do we deliver via Teams? So having, sort of gaining some clarity around your news and communication strategy will go a long way towards making you more successful with the technology capabilities and, again, the employee experience that Viva can deliver. Sort of thinking that through, I think, is a critical aspect of planning and growing.
Cool. Oh, good. Great answers. Great explanation. I always love hearing you talk. We didn't touch on it too much because you were talking about your great career, but you do a lot for the community, and I've seen you speak at several SharePoint Saturdays, SharePoint conferences, and whatnot. And I think we want to touch on that a little bit. But before we get there, what you were talking when we're talking about Viva and all of that, the question that I think a lot of customers ask is, well, what is it going to cost me? So is there any licensing ramifications or things that they really should be aware of?
Yeah, that's a great question because that's my favorite part of Viva Connections. It's the only piece of the suite that doesn't cost you anything extra. You get it because it's part of your license. So best part of Viva Connections is it's available to everyone. So that means you can spend your time, energy, resources, and budget on making a great intranet, planning and testing your navigation, building apps to deliver in the dashboard. Focus on the content and the experiences you're going to deliver, not the container or the tech that allows you to deliver it. And so the good news is you all own the capability. Now use it wisely. Take the money you saved because you don't have to license it and use it to communicate governance expectations around the intranet, about how important it is to keep content up to date, about how file naming makes search work better. Stop, creating versionitis. Stop with the .v1, .v2, .final, .really final, .this time I need it. One document, edit in place, everyone works on it. Don't send attachments, send links. Spend your energy building those good practices in the organization because you don't have to pay for licensing. So now you have enough, so it's not like it's free, but you don't have to pay for that part. You have to invest in all
other things, yeah,
that should have been happening all along. But now let's just remember. So just pretend that you saved a ton of money with Viva Connections and now use that to invest in your governance plan, your naming conventions, roles and responsibilities, and thinking about employee experiences so that you get a great intranet to deliver in using Viva Connections.
I love that answer because I just had that conversation with somebody yesterday, and they were kind of a little bit surprised. I'm like, yes, you could spend money on this different thing. I'm like, but really don't do that. It's for where you're at, don't take it here, put it here, spend it here. We still want your money. We just want to make sure that you're spending it appropriately, right? Not wasting, and then getting mad at us because.
Hey, now you're thinking like a BA.
I try. I think it's, I've been a developer for a while, and I've had enough failed products or projects go through. Like I built, I'm be standing for the customer. I built exactly what you told me you wanted. Yeah, but that's not exactly what we want. It's not what we want anymore, right? So. You got to learn to ask those why questions ahead of time, so you have the rework and all that good stuff.
So Susan, first of all, thank you. This has been, for me, I love this conversation because it really digs into the stuff that I love talking about: knowledge management, business solutions. So I will have those conversations all day long. Where you've mentioned things that are tangential to this conversation in depth. Where can people find you to learn more on those topics from you?
The best place to find me is on my website, which is susanhanley.com. My formal name, suhanley.com, won't work, so you have to use my formal name. And on my website, I usually have sort of, where's Waldo? Where am I going to be next?
Yep.
And now, like, I'm starting, it used to be where am I going to be speaking next, but from my home office. Now it's starting to look like I might be on the road again. We'll see. And the resources that I share with the community, probably the most popular of which is my governance questions for Microsoft 365. Mm-hmm. And that is a resource I've been sort of growing and building for the last 15 years. That I use in my own consulting practice and then share with the community. And I update it maybe 2-3 times a month because every time we get a new capability from Microsoft, we have a new decision that we now need to make. And so there's nothing static about governance. And so what I try to do is raise the question in a framework that allows you to have a series of conversations and then link to the place where you can learn specifically how do I execute against that decision once I've made it. So I use this framework in my consulting practice. I share it with the community. I update it all the time. And so I have a bunch of resources. So I have governance related resources. And then because I typically build intranets, which are based on communication sites, I also have a workbook that you can use to plan communication sites. And I love that you are using the user story concept, Jay, because I have in it the only thing I ever require when I'm working on a communication site is you have to write the user story for who you think your audience is going to be, and you got to write it in the as. I have a little table you can use as I need to so that I can.
Yes.
So I really want every site owner to think about who's coming to me. What do they need? Not just what I want to tell them, but what do my users need? So instead of just trying to push policy out, why don't you think about the questions you get on a regular basis and try to make those answers more easier and more obvious for your reader, because that's what they need from you.
Yep. Oh, man. Well, I will make sure that links to those resources on your website, of course, are all in there. Sue, again, thank you so much. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
We know you liked this episode of This Week in Teams because you're still listening. So if you want to hear more like this, make sure you click the subscribe button, notifications, and go to onthespot.tech for more from This Week in Teams and our sibling podcasts.